Good morning, ladies, or good afternoon. How's everybody doing today? Day two of your deep detox. Hi, Jihan.
Hello, Dana.
How are you?
All is well, thank you.
Good.
Yourself?
Alhamdulillah, all is good.
Great. Wanted to ask you, I just posted the question on Facebook about morning snack.
Yeah. Oh, I saw that.
Why are we not
No,
snacking?
you can always have a snack. If you need to have apples and dates between breakfast and lunch, as well as between lunch and dinner, and especially in the deep detox phase, I'm going to talk about, the next few days, if you decide to reintroduce animal protein, there is a bit of a difference in terms of timing when you're eating fruits and protein. But right now, when all we're eating is just fruits and vegetables, you ideally even should be eating every hour and a half, every 2 hours. So bring in uh bring in the fruits, bring in the snacks, bring in apples and dates, bring in other fruits, whatever you want in between the main meals of the smoothie and then the vegetables at lunch and the vegetables at dinner. All of that is perfect. You can't do this wrong, and don't let yourself go hungry. So if you feel you need to have a snack between breakfast and lunch, between lunch and dinner, and if you feel you need to have more than the apples and the dates, remember I said make sure you stick to the basics of the plan. Don't remove the apples and dates and replace them with something else, because the apples and the dates do serve a very specific purpose. So once you have your apples and dates in place, then anything else is fine, is great, actually. The more fruits, especially, the better. So you feel like having a little fruit salad, you feel like having a simple fruit like a banana or an orange, mangoes, whatever it is you feel like having, you can add, and make sure you're continuously feeding and giving your body as much healing potential as you can. So never hold back when it comes to fruits. You don't need to worry about that.
طيب, thank you for clarifying because I did as per the schedule. So I prepared apples and dates for today and yesterday as well, only in the afternoon.
Okay.
I skipped them in the morning and I wasn't sure why we did that. It's not that I'm hungry. I'm not that I'm super hungry. I'm
Yeah,
okay. Yani by noon now, I'm ready to eat lunch. But
that's
I
fine.
wasn't sure why we do that. I thought maybe you wanted us to eat less to give our liver more time to rest, something like that. That's why I wanted to clarify that with you.
With the liver, when we are talking about healing the liver, it's not about eating less. Actually, it's about eating a lot more of what the liver has been deficient in this whole time. So when it comes to fruits, this is what we want to keep increasing. There is no sort of upper limit when it comes to fruits, especially when you're healing the liver. So don't worry about that at all. And think of your fruits and everything you're eating in the deep detox. Think of it as literally fuel to heal your liver and your organs. You're literally, the more raw materials, these are raw building blocks for your organs and for your cells and for your hormones. The more of these building blocks that you can give them, especially that you've all been so deficient in them, the more you can give, the better. You cannot overeat fruits. Let's put it that way. Can't happen. Let me just turn off my Facebook because it's pinging and it's annoying. Let me just turn that off. Okay. All right. So today we are going to have sort of a biology class. If you want, you can grab a pen and paper or maybe take notes on your phone. We are going to actually discuss what are hormones. And it's so important for you to know what are these things we keep referring to. And you're in a program to balance and detox your hormones. So what are they? So often we're made to feel like, if you're not a medical doctor, if you're not a biology major, if you're not some kind of a scientist, then it's sort of above your pay grade to understand how your body works. You shouldn't even bother to try and figure out how your organs function, what your hormones do, what's the connection between all of your organs, or what's the connection between all of your systems. But you cannot become fully empowered in your body and fully autonomous and sovereign in your body unless you actually understand at the most basic level. I mean, we're not going to get into very scientific details here. I don't even know the very scientific details, and you don't really need to. You need to know the basics of how your body functions. You need to understand that if I have a night sweat, which organ of mine is giving me a signal? Which hormone of mine is the one that is not balanced? So that I'm waking up with a night sweat or I'm getting a hot flash, or if I have a heavy period, or if I have a headache, or if I can't lose weight. You need to know what's happening in your body, why it's happening, so that one, you don't freak out and you don't get worried. This gives you so much confidence when you can link the symptoms with the organ and the hormone and understand where the imbalance is coming. So you're not always worried about your health and freaking out and running to the doctor. It gives you confidence. And when you have the confidence, then you can take the action to rebalance. So we've already taken the action to rebalance. You're already eating the foods that are going to replenish any of the deficiencies you had, and you've removed the toxins that have weighed down your organs and your hormones so far. So you've already taken the action. Now that you're in the action, let's take some time to really then get into the intellectual side of this and understand on a basic level, what are the hormones? What are your hormones? How do they function or malfunction? And what you can do about it. You've already taken the action. Most of the time, when women hear the word hormones, you automatically just connect it to your what we call the sex hormones, your estrogen, your progesterone, or whatever it is that's giving you painful periods, endometriosis, PCOS, night sweats, hot flashes. That's usually what we think of first when somebody says hormones. We think of our sex hormones. So we have sex hormones, and then we also have stress hormones, and then we have metabolic hormones. You have three basic sets. I'm not going to go through every single tiny hormone or like adjacent hormone. I'm just going to go through your main basic hormones that you've all heard of, but you might not necessarily understand how they function or how they're connected to each other. So like I said, hormones, first thing that goes through your mind when we say hormones is my bad period, my painful period, my PMS, my mood swings, my headaches. So those are called your sex hormones. And your main sex hormones are estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen is the hormone that basically makes you female. It's the one responsible for regulating your period. It's the one responsible for your curves. It's the one responsible for your breast. It's the one responsible for your voice. It's everything that makes you female. That's your estrogen. Your progesterone is also just as important, but we don't think of it too much because it mainly functions when you're pregnant. Mainly, it's the one that's there to help keep the fetus viable and to help you maintain a healthy pregnancy. We don't think of it too much when we start to go through perimenopause and menopause, although when let's say you went to the doctor and he told you have high estrogen, then that typically means that you have lower progesterone. We want to keep the balance of these two the same, or not too much of a big difference. So those are your main sex hormones. You just need to understand those two. And they are produced in your ovaries. They're not produced inside your uterus. They're not produced anywhere except inside your ovaries. Your ovaries are the organ that creates these hormones and then pumps these hormones out into your body. So how many of you actually know what a hormone is before I go any further? Like, do you know what the definition of a hormone is? These things that are like messing up your life and messing up your body and giving you all these symptoms. Do you actually know what a hormone is?
I believe it's something that it is excreted in the body to regulate different cycles, and I think everybody has it, not only the women, men, everybody, and it has different kinds that can even control the mindset and stuff like that. So that what I know.
Yes, very close. Anybody else? So your hormones are chemical messengers. And yes, men and women both have them. They're chemical messengers of your endocrine system. You might remember back in school in biology, you learned about your endocrine system. Your endocrine system is a collection of organs, your ovaries, your pituitary gland, your thyroid gland, your pancreas, your adrenals, your kidneys are part of it also. These are organs that produce and secrete hormones. So obviously, men and women, well, men obviously don't have the ovaries. They have the testicles. They have their own version of sex organs, but they all have pancreas. They all have thyroid. They all have the adrenal glands. We all have the same set of major hormones that are not sex hormones. So your hormones are these chemical messengers that are continuously being produced in these organs, in what's called your endocrine system. And what your endocrine system does after it produces these hormones is it sends them all out. You're right, Timaro. It sends them all out all over your body. And they have so many different functions. So they control every single cell and every single organ, basically your entire body. They're involved in digestion. They're involved in metabolism. They're involved in growth. They're involved in reproduction. And yes, even your mood. So everything that happens in your body at some point is connected back to a hormone. And this is why every single chronic condition is hormonal, and every single hormonal condition becomes chronic. You can't separate, and you can't say that, I have a thyroid condition. It has nothing to do with my PMS. Of course it does. Or I have high stress hormones. It has nothing to do with my insulin. Of course it does. And I'm going to explain why. So it's so important to maintain the balance here, because these hormones need to be produced in the right amounts inside the respective organs. Then they need to be released in the right amounts at the right times in order to maintain this balance in your body. Think of a symphony. You need all the instruments to play on time, in tune, at the right beat. That's what your hormones should be doing when they're optimized. As soon as one goes off, as soon as one is out of tune or one is playing at a different beat, there's a downstream effect. There's a domino effect that affects the entire system, that affects the entire symphony. You cannot have a symphony playing in tune, in sync, and producing beautiful music if there's even one instrument that's off. So think of your hormones that way. So the messages can either be sent out in the right frequency at the right time and in the right amounts, or they can be sent out too little, not at the right time, not at the right frequency. There's a lot of different variables here. And the reason that that happens is because your organs, your endocrine system that's responsible for producing these hormones, these organs are not, and the cells of these organs are not getting the proper fuel or raw material to produce. So think of your ovaries as a factory for estrogen and progesterone. Think of your thyroid as the factory for your thyroid hormones. Think of your pancreas as the factory for insulin. How can it produce if it doesn't have the right raw materials? And where does the raw material come from? Everything you eat and drink and put on your skin and breathe, and your emotions and how you process them. All of these, it seems like it's a lot to regulate, and that's why they're so delicate, because any one of these elements can cause them to go off. So the first thing, again, that we said women focus on are your sex hormones. And usually we don't really think of them until there's an issue with our reproductive system. And if we have no real issues, then we don't really even think about it until we hit what? Perimenopause and menopause. So even if you've gone your entire life, your periods are okay, you don't have that much pain, maybe PMS is not a big deal, it's mild, the periods are not too heavy, but then you enter what's called perimenopause, and you start to get the hot flashes, or you start to get the night sweats, or the period starts to get irregular, or your mood swings suddenly start to be all over the place. Then we start to pay attention and we start talking about hormones. So I want you all here, first of all, to differentiate very clearly where you are when it comes to your sex hormones vis-a-vis perimenopause and menopause, because some women also confuse this. Perimenopause is the phase before menopause, and that can happen anywhere from your mid-30s all the way to your 50s if you're still getting your period. So it can last anywhere from 8, 10 to 15 years. Perimenopause means you're still menstruating. You still get your period regularly every month. And even if it's irregular, you don't go more than 2 or 3 months without it. But in the meantime, you have all the symptoms. You have night sweats, you have hot flashes, you have painful periods, maybe they're irregular, maybe you get some acne, maybe you have all the mood swings, you get the headaches, you get the migraines. All of that are symptoms of perimenopause. Menopause happens when you stop menstruating and you haven't had your period for 12 months in a row. So you have to go through the 12 months consecutively to be considered that you are in menopause. If you still get it 1 month on, 1 month off, then you are still in perimenopause. So how many of you know, or after what I've said, can identify where you're at? Put it in the chat if you're menopause or perimenopause. Peri. Menopause. Perimenopause can last a long time. And this is why it's so important to figure out how to go through it symptom-free, because all of these symptoms will come up if your ovaries are not getting the proper raw materials to function. Perimenopause is not a mistake, and menopause is not a mistake. They're also not diseases. They're not conditions. They're just phases that we're supposed to go through. And we're not supposed to go through them suffering. We're not supposed to have these massive, huge, dramatic changes when we go through these phases. It's supposed to be very mild. You're not even supposed to be aware really of what's happening. Maybe you have a little hot flash here or there. You have a little symptom here or there, but the dramatics that are being created by the medical industry and the need to intervene continuously as if it's a disease that needs to be treated is completely fabricated by the medical industry. This is a phase. It's not a condition. And it's not a disease. The same way that when you first got your period when you were 12, that was a phase. Puberty was a phase. Nobody intervened. Nobody tried to stop your hormones so that you stop menstruating. It's understood that it's a natural part of becoming a woman. And then when you get to perimenopause and menopause, that's just the natural conclusion. And you are supposed to go through it effortlessly. The reason you're not is not because your hormones have turned against you. It's not because you have a defective ovaries or hormones. It's because we are asking your hormones, we are putting pressure on the hormones to function optimally inside a very hostile terrain that we have created. Not on purpose, of course, not knowingly, but the end result is you've created a terrain where the sex hormones can't function optimally. So this is important for you to differentiate. Marwa is in menopause. All right. So the sex hormones, like I said, produced in your ovaries, and the estrogen and progesterone are the primary female sex hormones. We also have a little bit of testosterone. Men also have a little bit of estrogen, but obviously we have more estrogen than testosterone, and they have way more testosterone than estrogen. But these are the ones that regulate everything related to your cycles, to your moods, to your periods, to perimenopause and menopause. What you have to understand when they tell you that you have high estrogen, which can happen in perimenopause and menopause, and it's quite ironic because during perimenopause, what is supposed to happen is estrogen is supposed to decline because estrogen is what regulates your cycle and you're supposed to be getting out of your cycle. But what happens with many women is instead of declining estrogen in perimenopause and menopause, they find themselves with what's diagnosed as high estrogen. And that can be really confusing when you're supposed to have declining estrogen at this time. And so all the interventions will go straight to the ovaries because they're the ones producing the estrogen. And then you might be prescribed hormone replacement therapy, or you might get birth control pills, anything that tries to address the problem where you would think that's where the origin of the problem is, in the ovaries. But here's what most medical systems and medical doctors don't understand. Your estrogen is produced in your ovaries, yes, but once you're done, your body is done with your cycle. And even if you're in menopause, you still have a cycle. You just don't know it. Even if your body is done with the estrogen cycle every single month. So your body produces estrogen during your cycle so that estrogen can regulate your cycle. It helps you with ovulation, helps with releasing the egg, and then it helps with creating the environment for the egg, whether it gets fertilized or not. And then you menstruate, and then it's done. That's a cycle of estrogen. And then it happens all over again the month after that. Your ovaries pump more estrogen to repeat that cycle. But what happens to the estrogen once your body is finished with the cycle? It has to get filtered through your liver, and your liver filters it and then eliminates the estrogen that's already been used up by your body to make space for next month's supply of estrogen. So it's not just about your ovary producing the estrogen. What's the organ that's going to process and filter and eliminate the used estrogen to make room for next month? That's your liver. The liver is responsible for filtering and processing everything in your body, everything you eat and drink and all of it, plus hormones. And one of those hormones is estrogen. So if your estrogen, your ovaries could be producing the exact amount of estrogen that you need every single month. No glitches there. But if you're going through the cycle and then the estrogen has to be filtered by your liver, and your liver is overburdened because you're living on bread and cheese and pasta and caffeine and alcohol and medication and not sleeping and not moving and eating junk and all the stuff on the list, you have an overburdened liver that cannot process and filter and get rid of the extra estrogen. So it stays stuck in your body. And where does it get stuck? It dumps it back into your uterus, and then it stays there and it grows there and it festers there. And that's what causes growths in your uterus. That's what causes fibroids. That's what causes endometriosis, and that's what can cause PCOS. At the same time, your liver is still overloaded trying to process it. So the liver is working extra hard to get rid of it. And when does the liver work its hardest? At night. It regenerates at night. So this is why you wake up at night in a night sweat and feeling hot, because your liver is overheated from trying to process not just the estrogen, but everything else that you've consumed that burdens the liver. So a night sweat is not actually, or a hot flash, are not actually a direct result of high estrogen or a direct result of your ovaries malfunctioning. They are a direct result of a liver that cannot filter properly. And this is so key to remember. When you get a hot flash, when you get a night sweat, that's not your ovaries. That's your liver overheating. And this is why women in menopause, who technically have no more estrogen, have no more hormones, they have no more cycles, they have nothing, can still experience night sweats and hot flashes. That's why men can also experience hot night sweats and wake up sweating. It happens because it's their liver. Their liver is overloaded. So this is so important to remember, because if you're trying to treat the root cause, which is what we're doing, the root cause of your perimenopause symptoms is not your uterus and is not your ovaries. It's your liver being unable to filter estrogen. So that's what we have to say about sex. The most important thing you need to know about your sex hormones is that. The next set of hormones we have are your stress hormones. Now, stress hormones, when we think of stress, we think of stressful situations in our life. We think of cortisol, of course, is the stress hormone. We think, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed, I have high cortisol. And again, like your sex hormones, cortisol wasn't created to malfunction. It wasn't created to give your body a hard time. It wasn't created to rise to such an extent that then it gives you symptoms. Cortisol was created, and it's been with your body. It's been with us physiologically since the first man, just like all the other hormones. It was created as the hormone that helps you face stress. It helps you deal with stress. I'm sure you've heard of the term flight or fight. This is the hormone that helps you when you're faced with a stressful situation, an issue with a spouse, an issue with at work, anything that you just feel is hard for you to handle. That's why cortisol was created, to help you get through that. But what happens is we are put in constant states of stress that our body is continuously asked to react to situations of stress. And we weren't meant to live in a constant state of stress. Originally, your two stress hormones are adrenaline and cortisol. These are the main ones. You have some other smaller ones, but these are the big main ones. And these are produced in your adrenal glands. So if you put your hands on your waist, on top of your kidneys, each kidney, on top of the kidneys, there's something called an adrenal gland. And this is the part of the endocrine system that produces your stress hormones. So 100,000 years ago or 200,000 years ago, with the first man, what did they need? What was the stressful part of their lives, right? They were living in caves. They were living outdoors. Stress came in short bursts. And usually the source of the stress was, they're out hunting, and all of a sudden one of the animals they're trying to hunt starts to run after them. So they literally have to run for their lives. Or maybe another source of stress was lack of food. All of a sudden they knew there was a famine coming. Or maybe the source of stress was maybe a battle with another tribe or something. So the stress hormones were literally activated to help them save their lives. So they weren't in constant trigger states. There weren't little things happening that continuously needed their body to produce cortisol. It was produced in small spurts every, months in between that they would need to activate the cortisol in their bodies to help them overcome a source of stress. But of course, today, we're not being chased by animals. Most of us are not going off to fight, battles. We have plenty of food. We don't have to worry about famines and where to get our next meal. So the main sources of, that original man had to deal with, those don't exist anymore. But the trigger inside us to help us fight off stress is still there. The intuitive trigger for your body to save you is still there. It's just what it's saving you from that's changed. So now what do we have in modern day life? That's the source of stress. Waking up when you don't want to wake up, having to drive in horrible traffic, having a horrible boss, having a very stressful relationship, having to deal with your husband and your kids and work and everything that's expected of you. Those are your external sources of stress. And everybody has to deal with those on a regular basis. The news, world events, all of those things are sources of stress. But what we also don't realize is that while we have external sources of stress where your body is going to pump cortisol to help you deal with every single one of those situations, there's also internal sources of stress. All of us know the synthetic form of cortisol, which is cortisone. So let's say you suddenly get really sick and you have a horrible infection or something flares up in your body and you go to the hospital. What do they give you instantly to calm down that infection or to calm down your internal situation? Cortisone, because it is the hormone that is there to put out fires, whether those fires are coming from the outside or whether those fires are being initiated internally. So what happens when you are continuously triggering the internal source of cortisol that you probably don't realize is doing that? The internal sources are the inflammatory foods that you eat. So every time you drink coffee, every time you eat a processed food, every time you consume processed sugar, a soda, medication, cortisone jumps in like, oh, this is not supposed to be happening. She's not supposed to be drinking coffee on an empty stomach. Where are the nutrients? This is nutrient free. There's nothing that I can do with coffee. Oh no, here she went and had a melted cheese sandwich. What are we supposed to do with a melted cheese sandwich? All of those internal triggers signal to cortisol that there is a problem inside. A problem it needs to go in and it needs to fix and it needs to put the fire out. So when you think about your day, pre-detox, when you wake up and have coffee on an empty stomach and your kids are stressing you out in the morning and your husband is stressing you out in the morning and you're expected to run around and do everything for everybody before they go and leave for school, then you need to get ready for work. You get yourself ready for work, you run out, you get in your car and you face horrible traffic and you need to drive through the traffic and you get to work. You get to work, you have another cup of coffee, you haven't had breakfast yet, and then you find a pile of papers on your desk or your boss has asked you for some crazy deadline that you can't say no to. So you have another coffee to sort of wake you up even more and help you get through it. Then your coworkers decide to order pizza for lunch. So you eat the pizza with your coworkers. Then you have to run back home. Maybe you need to do some grocery shopping and you need to pick up the kids and you need to take them to their activities. The kids are not being cooperative. You have to run home. Maybe you have to make a meal. Then you have to help your kids with their homework and then you have to help them get ready for bed. And you're not getting any help or support doing all of this. And then maybe you have some ailing parents. You need to pass by them to make sure they're okay. Then you come home and you finally collapse at 10 p.m. and you haven't had a minute for yourself and all you've had all day is coffee and pizza and maybe you grabbed a sandwich somewhere along the way. Every single one of those events and every single thing you've put into your body has triggered your body to push cortisol to help calm down the inflammation in your body. From all of those things. All of those are inflammatory sources. So you, instead of like ancient times, having to deal with an animal who's running after you once a month or a battle once a year, you are battling and you are being chased, the equivalent of being chased by an animal or battling in a war every hour of your day. So imagine if your adrenal glands have to continuously be pumping out the cortisol to help you deal with that. There isn't a finite amount of cortisol in your adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands are going to be exhausted trying to keep up with all of the triggers in your life. And then that means what? You will be exhausted. This is what leads to something called adrenal fatigue. The adrenals are just so tired of continuously pumping cortisol that they can't do it anymore. They run out. So you end up exhausted. You end up not sleeping well. You end up with heart palpitations. You can end up with high blood pressure. You can end up with heart disease. You can end up with anxiety. You can end up with what's called the cortisol belly. So let's say you really haven't changed anything in terms of what you eat and drink, and maybe you're even working out, but because the body can't filter out such an excess amount of cortisol, it pools in your midsection, and you end up with something called a cortisol belly. That no matter what you do doesn't go away because you haven't gotten to the root of why you have high cortisol, which is all the external and internal triggers of cortisol. So that's your main stress hormone. How many of you up until now, what I've described with sex hormones and what I've described with stress hormones, can say they have an imbalance in one or the other or both? Both, yeah. I'm expecting everybody to say both, or the majority to say both, because they're interconnected. They're related. Yeah. Yep. And this is not to worry you at all. This is expected. I was expecting all of you to say both based on your symptoms, because the hormones sort of, they work off each other and it's a domino effect. The last set of hormones we're going to talk about are your thyroid hormones, or what's called metabolic hormones. So these are your, if you have a thyroid condition, you know your thyroid hormones really well. If you don't, the thyroid hormones, the main ones are T3 and T4, and these are the ones produced in your thyroid gland, which is right here, and they're responsible for regulation of your metabolism. Sort of think of them as the thermostat, sort of the energy thermostat for your body. So again, in order for your metabolism to be functioning smoothly, you need your thyroid to be functioning optimally. And you have two types of thyroid hormone imbalances. Either it's overactive, so it's called hyperthyroidism, is when the thyroid gland produces too much of the thyroid hormones. And then you have an underactive thyroid, and this is the more common one, or hypothyroidism, when it's not producing enough. So if you have an overactive hyperthyroid, the symptoms that you can have are, because it's too fast, right? You can have rapid weight loss, even though you haven't changed anything about the way that you eat. You're not intentionally going on a diet or eating less or exercising more. But because your energy thermostat is on high, it's on overdrive. So you'll feel rapid weight loss. You can have very loose stools all the time, heart palpitations. Because your body, the thermostat is on high, you can have an intolerance to heat. You can be constantly anxious, nervous. You might have trouble sleeping, constantly feeling your hands are warm and moist. Those are symptoms of hyperthyroidism. If it's underactive, it's the opposite of that. So it's like it's really slow. So no matter what you do, you can't lose weight. And you've got sort of brain fog. Everything sort of moves in slow motion for you. You might be depressed. You might have, you're just tired all the time. You're fatigued. Your hair falls out. You have dry skin. You sort of have aches and pains in your body. You can't focus. You can't remember. And instead of your hands and feet being warm, your hands and feet are cold. Those are the symptoms of hypothyroidism. And instead of loose stools, you might have regular constipation. So how many of you think or know already that you have either hyper or hypothyroidism? Hypo. Not everybody will have this. Whether you actually have been diagnosed, though, as having any kind of thyroid condition. So let's say, you go and do a blood test, and the blood test comes back and your thyroid hormones are all within range, but you still have all of these symptoms, then you do actually have a struggling thyroid. It might not show up in a blood test because blood tests are not created to show optimal results. Blood tests show how you compare to the average population. And if you look around to the average population, what does your average population look like? Sick, tired, exhausted, stressed, already taking medication, constant headaches, nobody's sleeping. So that's what they compare you to. So maybe to a very exhausted, sick population, your thyroid hormones are within range, but they're not optimal. And as long as they're not optimal, we know that, and you have all of these symptoms, then you know that at some level your thyroid is struggling. So even though you don't have a official diagnosis, we go by the symptoms. And the same thing goes for sex hormones and stress hormones. You might go and test for cortisol and it comes back totally normal. But if you have anxiety and you're not sleeping and you have a cortisol belly, then we know at some, and you're not losing weight, then we know at some level your cortisol isn't functioning. What you really have to remember is that you are not being tested against a healthy, optimal, the 5% of the population. You're being tested against the common range of people who are unfortunately well below optimal level. So you're doing a little bit better than the normal, but you're not actually where you need to be. Let me see. Hyper, Iman, none. Marwa, yes, I did all the tests, but in Ray. And you have the symptoms, Marwa. So you did all the tests, but do you have any of the symptoms I mentioned?
Yes, Dana, I'm suffering from everything you're just saying. I have the cortisol belly, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe because of the menopause, I'm already more than a year and a half. So you said after 12 consecutive months,
Yeah.
then I am definitely in the menopause thing. For the thyroid, I had always been questioning that I'm having the thyroid because I'm gaining weight, I'm having the brain fog. I do forget incredibly, in an incredible way. Yet, whenever I do the tests and exams, which was the last one was last week, it's all within the range. So I don't know where I'm going wrong.
Yeah. It's not you. You're not the one going wrong. It's the testing. They're testing you against more sick people. So against more sick people, you're okay. It's not showing up because the ranges that they've chosen to determine are the ranges of sick people, not the ranges of optimally healthy, non-symptomatic people. So this is why we always go by the symptoms, and you go and you sort of self-diagnose yourself as you're going along by which symptoms start to reverse. Then you know that your thyroid has started to heal. You know that your cortisol has started to lessen. You know that your estrogen, because you're detoxing your liver, the estrogen, and then you're having less hot flashes and night sweats, then you know, regardless of what the tests say, your direct experience of it, it doesn't lie. So you always have to be very in tune with your body and listen to what the direct experience and the communication and the symptoms and the signals that your body is trying to give you about what is and what isn't working. Zainab, the tests were in range, but I did have symptoms and I had a malignant nodule, so it was definitely struggling. Obviously, you have a nodule, it's struggling. So again, you would need some type of test to see or scanning to see a nodule. But this is why when you have persistent symptoms, and let's say you weren't going to do a detox and you weren't going to heal naturally, if you have persistent symptoms and you continuously are told that there's nothing there, there's nothing wrong with you, or obviously, my favorite one, when they tell you it's just stress, go home and stress less, doesn't really give you tools for healing yourself. And definitely the more you feel symptoms, the more you need to investigate, because you don't ever accept that it's in your head or it's just stress or this is just the way it is. Don't ever accept that and keep digging until you get to the root cause. The last hormone we're going to talk about today is another metabolic hormone, and that's insulin. So insulin is probably, out of all of these, the only one where if you go and test for any kind of insulin imbalance, the doctor will actually, or I hope they will address nutrition. For everything else, you're really not going to find any OBGYN telling you for estrogen, you need to, remove wheat and dairy and processed sugar so that your liver can heal, so that it can process estrogen. It won't happen. Although I think I posted about this last week, couple of my clients, new clients, came and told me that 2 separate OBGYNs that they go to had actually recommended for them to remove white flour, white processed sugar, sodas, and junk food. So it's a start. it's a start. To start to see some medical doctors start to make a connection is great, but the majority of them will not. And definitely the majority of them, if you have high cortisol, are not going to, they're going to tell you to try and relax, remove the external stress triggers from your life. Most of them are not going to tell you that it's coffee, it's bread, it's pasta, it's junk food, it's sodas that create another layer of high cortisol internally. But when it comes to insulin, there is that connection at least, right? There is at least the connection that it's related to the sugars that you're consuming. But then instead of telling you and explaining to you that it's the processed sugars that are creating the problem, they're going to lump all the sugars together and tell you it's all the sugars, the processed sugars and the natural sugars, and then mistakenly remove the natural sugars that you need to heal. And in some cases, leave a little bit of the processed sugar. I mean, my parents, my father was diabetic. He was a doctor, and my mother is diabetic still. We're working on it. And her doctor has, flat out told her she can have a piece of aish baladi, okay, but don't have any dates. And don't eat mangoes and don't eat grapes. But she can have some rice, she can have some bread, she can have cheese, right? All of these are sources of processed sugar. So even though there is advice around nutrition when it comes to insulin, it is completely wrong. And that's why if you know anybody who's got diabetes or pre-diabetes or insulin resistance, they still have diabetes or pre-diabetes or insulin resistance because their doctors don't understand the root cause of that and why the insulin got imbalanced and how to actually get to the root cause so that you can 100% reverse diabetes, pre-diabetes, and insulin resistance. So here's what happens with insulin. Insulin is produced in your pancreas. That's the organ that produces insulin. Again, insulin wasn't created to make you sick. It wasn't created to go haywire. It was created, it has a very specific function. It's created to, when you eat any kind of sugar, whether that's fruits or bread or pasta or anything that you eat, even protein, insulin has the responsibility of moving the sugar in your bloodstream into your cells. Remember, everything goes back to your cells. So we need to feed the cells. But what do the cells recognize as fuel? They only recognize the pure natural sugar from fruits. They don't recognize the sugar from bread or pasta or cereals or granola bars or cakes or cookies or even gluten-free products. They definitely don't recognize the sugars in dairy, lactose. They don't recognize the sugars in sodas, fake sugars. That's not the sugar that your cells need. That's not the sugars that they were created to accept so they can use it as fuel and as raw material. But insulin is like, well, I have to do this job anyway. And all I'm getting is, when all you're eating is bread and pasta and processed foods and maybe 1 apple a day, insulin still has to move that sugar, even if it's not the right sugar. It still has to move it into your cells. So initially, the body will pump a little bit of insulin to move the sugar from your melted cheese sandwich into your cells. And the cells will be like, but this is not the right sugar, insulin. Can you just take it away? We don't want it. We're waiting for the fruits. We're waiting for the real sugar. And insulin says, well, this is all we got today. This is all she ate. So the cells will say, okay, fine. So they'll open up a little bit so the insulin can move that sugar into the cells. But then you keep doing this every single day of your life, every single meal. And every single time the insulin and the cells have the same conversation. Insulin's like, this is all we've got today. And the cells are like, but this is not what we need. Please just open up, let me move this sugar. So the cells agree. But then the more you do this, the more the cells decide we've had enough. So then at some point, we never know when it's going to happen. The cells, that could be years, right? You do this every single day for years and you're fine. But one day your cells reach a breaking point. And here we go. The insulin is coming again with the sugar from your big macarona bechamel lunch. And the cells say, you know what? Enough. We're not doing this anymore. And they really shut down this time and they refuse to take this processed sugar from your macarona bechamel meal. They refuse. So then insulin tries to work harder. The body pumps more insulin to sort of force the cells to take it. And the cells are like, nope, we're done. We're not doing it. So then the body forces more insulin to try and force this processed sugar into the cells. And the cells become resistant. So when you hear the term insulin resistant, that's talking about the cells that have reached a breaking point and they refuse to take the processed sugar anymore. The other reason the cells can become resistant is when you overeat animal protein and animal fat, it coats your cells, so it literally blocks the insulin from being able to push the sugar into the cells. So they become resistant on another level. Insulin is supposed to spike to move sugar into your cells, but they make you feel like anytime your insulin spikes, this is a problem. This is what we have to solve, without thinking about why did the cells become resistant to start with. They became resistant because the type of fuel, the type of sugar that insulin is just doing its job, but the type of fuel that it's left with and forced to bring is the wrong fuel. So the solution is very simple. Solution is remove the processed sugar that the cells don't want. And obviously, the longer this happens, then you go from being just insulin resistant to going to pre-diabetic to going to full-on diabetic. So you just have to reverse this. You remove the processed sugar that the cells don't want. They don't want it. Stop trying to force it on them. And you bring in the natural sugar that the cells recognize and they know how to make use of. But if you've been insulin resistant or diabetic for a while, your cells are very untrusting of what you're about to do. And insulin and the dynamics between your insulin and your cells is still at a resistant level. So it takes time to retrain your cells that the sugar that the insulin is bringing in now is the good sugar. So even, this is why a lot of diabetics don't want to go near fruits, even though they're eating the processed foods, because if they're measuring their blood sugar and they're using a glucose monitor and all of that, it will show insulin going higher with a fruit. And so they, oh, look, it's spiked, so I need to stay away from the fruits. No, the reason it spikes is because you just stopped eating processed sugars yesterday and you just replaced them with natural sugars today. There has to be an interim period where we retrain insulin and your cells to a new dynamic where they're just using the natural sugars. So it's not a scary thing when insulin, quote unquote, spikes. And actually this word is just, it's a fear-mongering word. Your insulin, let's say you don't have prediabetes, you don't have insulin resistance, you don't have anything. Insulin has a resting rate, which is when you're not eating. And as soon as you eat something, it rises a bit to do its job. It actually can't move, whether it's processed sugar or the right sugar, into your cells. It can't do its job unless it's, increased. It's exactly as if, think about your heart rate, right? If I'm sitting right now, I'm not doing anything. I have a resting heart rate. As soon as I get up, and if I'm just walking, my heart rate is going to go up to support the extra movement. And if I go work out, my heart is going to pump even more to support that bigger movement. Insulin is the same thing. It's supposed to rise when you eat to move the food and the sugar into your cells. It's supposed to do that. And then it's supposed to come down. Saying that insulin is never supposed to go up is like saying your heart rate is supposed to stay the same when you're sitting as when you're working out. So the issue with insulin is the type of sugar it's trying to move into your cells, how much the body has to keep pumping insulin because the cells are resistant. And if this is happening repeatedly, where insulin stays high and never gets to go back down to its resting rate. So again, we need to go back to the root cause. Stop forcing insulin, because that's what you're doing, and then blaming it. Stop forcing insulin to try and move fuel that it wasn't trained to move. It was trained to move, and your cells were trained to receive natural sugar from fruits, never the processed sugars from bread, pasta, and all the other stuff that we eat. So you can see now that every single one of your hormone sets and the reason they malfunction has a root cause in what you eat and drink and what you think and what you feel and how you manage stress. They're all connected. And when one of them starts to malfunction, another one is going to kick in. So for example, if you are not consuming enough natural sugar, so your cells are not getting enough natural sugar, and your insulin is having to work overtime to try and push the processed sugar into your cells. And the cells are saying, there's no energy here. There's no fuel here. You're giving me empty fuel. And insulin is like, well, I don't know what else to give you. That's all she ate today. Guess which other hormone has to kick in to make up for the lack of fuel and the lack of energy that you are experiencing because you're eating processed foods and because your insulin is not able to move the sugar into your cells? Cortisol. Cortisol is going to jump in because it's there always to try and maintain balance in your body. It's going to jump in. Guess which hormone is going to jump in when your metabolism is not functioning, when your thyroid is not able to pump enough or is under pumping thyroid hormones to keep you regulating and moving? Cortisol. Guess which hormone is going to jump in when your estrogen is not doing what it's supposed to be doing? Also cortisol. There's a lot of links like that, and I'll share an infographic about that. When this hormone dips, which one comes in to replace it, and then you'll be able to see to what extent the whole body is this one dynamic, interconnected system. It's not when you have PCOS, then that links it to an insulin resistance. When you have weak thyroid, then we can see that you might have high cortisol because it needs to jump in to regulate your metabolism because your thyroid isn't able to do that. So everything is connected. And this is why every single hormonal condition becomes chronic, and every single chronic condition has its roots in your hormones. All right. So how many of you think you also have an issue with insulin, whether you've been diagnosed insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, diabetic, or just by the symptoms? When there's any kind of malfunction with insulin, usually what you see right away is constant hunger. Because your cells, like I said, they're not being fed. No matter, you could eat a whole big bowl of pasta by yourself, and an hour later, you might still be hungry because that bowl of pasta had 0 nutrients. So constant hunger, even though you might be eating a lot, is a sign of imbalanced insulin because your cells are deficient in nutrients. If you are also belly, insulin can also pool in the belly. Insulin is also called the fat storage hormone. So after a point in time, when the cells say, I'm not taking this anymore, I'm not taking this fake sugar anymore, take it away. Well, this insulin has to put it somewhere. And do you know where it puts it? It hides it in your fat cells, in your thighs, in your belly, in your upper arms. It has to put it somewhere, and it has to put it somewhere away from your organs so it doesn't harm you, this processed sugar, this toxic sugar. So it hides it in your fat cells. So when you gain weight, you're not actually gaining weight because you're eating too much fat for the most part. And especially people who say, I'm not eating a lot of protein. I don't understand. I've limited protein, but you're eating bread and pasta and all of that. That goes straight into your fat cells because the body has no use for it. So if you have any of those symptoms, also if you have PCOS, those are signs of imbalanced sugar. If you have skin tags, sometimes little brown skin tags that show up, even if you're not showing on a test, those are signs that your insulin is working too hard, harder than it needs to. Wait, Zainab has an add-on to her comment. I meant the blood tests were in range, but not the ultrasound and FNA. Okay. You need to, and this is why you keep persevering, because if your symptom is still there and you know that a symptom is still there, you need to continue to find the root cause. May, my doctor prescribed HRT, but I refuse to take. That's why I'm here in this program. When you think about it, ladies, none of the conditions that any of you have, from the mild ones all the way to the more serious ones, not a single one is a result of a pharmaceutical deficiency. Not one. Not your headaches, not your PMS, not your endometriosis, not your PCOS, not your night sweats, not your hair loss, not your cancer, not your ADHD. Not a single one is because you are deficient in a pharmaceutical. It's because you are deficient in basic nutrients and your body is carrying a high toxic load. It's not because there's a medicine that you forgot to take, and so it gave you, the result is you end up with condition. That was my question. How do they function together? Yes, I will share an infographic on that. Jihan, my hair has been falling. Will this change with the detox? I used to have thick, beautiful hair. Anytime you see hair loss, it is a result of toxicity and deficiency as well. Specifically with hair, we're looking at a deficiency, and not most people think it's just iron, but we're also looking at a deficiency in zinc, magnesium, selenium. Those are key nutrients that when we see there is a natural hair loss that needs to happen every day, and I think the range is about 50 to 100 strands of hair per day there's a natural shedding that has to happen. There's also shedding that happens seasonally. So you might find that as we're heading into the fall season is all about shedding. You might find that your hair sheds a little bit more. And then you also have to look at the deficiencies. The other thing you have to look at, something that can build up over time, is water quality. So depending on where you are in the world, it could be that and in Egypt we have horrible water quality, so you might need to look into a filter for your shower. The type of shampoo you're using, right? Is it one that is more natural, or is that full of chemicals that over time will kill off the hair follicles and cause hair loss? So there's more than one thing we need to look at. It's what might you be deficient in when it comes to minerals and vitamins. The toxicity leading up to hair loss, basically when you're over consuming all the processed foods and all the processed sugars, what happens is it creates something called leaky gut, where your body can't absorb nutrients. And then this causes problems across the board, one of which is hair loss, because even if you're eating a lot of nutrient dense foods, but at the same time you're eating all the foods that are the toxic inflammatory foods, then the body will not be able to absorb and make use of the nutrients that you are consuming. This is why we always say you have to do both things: remove the toxins and replenish the deficiencies. So there's more than one way to tackle hair loss for sure. Genetics, potentially, but genetics, as with anything. So whether it's hair loss or diabetes or cholesterol or any condition that runs in your family, what you have inherited is the potential for that disease. You've inherited, yes, maybe there's DNA that we can, find inside your body that matches the DNA of your father, your mother, your grandparents for that particular disease. But the disease is not just going to manifest just because you inherited the genetics. You also inherited the lifestyle that led to this disease. So you came from your parents and your grandparents, and yes, okay, they had diabetes, they had hair loss, and they passed that on down to you. But what did they also pass on down to you? Everything they eat and everything they drink and the way they live and the way they move or don't move and the way they deal with stress or not and their emotions. So if we all come in from family, and all of us we come into families and we're all eating and drinking and living the same way, and we have a predisposition to a certain genetic disease. Like, for example, for me, my father had diabetes, he had high blood pressure, and then he had a heart condition. My mother had fibroids, she had to have her uterus removed. She had gallbladder stones, she had to have her gallbladder removed. And then now she has diabetes. By the time they were my age, so I'm 52. By the time they were both 52, that's between them, that's what they had. I don't have a single one of those. And it's not because I'm lucky. It's not because it's a miracle. It's because 15 years ago, I decided I'm not going to eat the way they're eating. I'm not going to wake up every day and eat my menusha and my lebne and my za'atar and my coffee with milk, and then have pasta and rice for lunch, and then have another melted cheese sandwich for dinner, which is what I was doing up until that point when I was growing up. That's how we all ate. So do I still have the predisposition? Pretty sure if I go do some kind of a DNA or genetic testing, I'm pretty sure I'm going to find my parents' DNA, which is going to include diabetes, which is going to include fibroids, which is going to include high blood pressure, potentially. But are those diseases going to show up in my life? Yeah, if I decide, I'm done with this whole health thing, I'm going to go back and eat the way that my parents were eating. Yeah, very high chance, probably 99% chance I will end up with the same conditions. So be very wary of just sitting back on the genetics excuse and just saying there's nothing I can do about it because it's genetic. Yeah, partially genetic, but be very discerning about what that means, and be very smart and honest with yourself that you also inherited the lifestyle that optimizes these genes to manifest and show themselves. Any questions about your hormones, ladies? This is a very, very basic explanation. You know, you have the three sets: sex, stress, metabolic. You have lots of other, hormones that also at play, but these are the big ones that when you start to understand how they function, then you can start to connect your symptoms. You can start to understand how they bounce off each other. And then it just gives you the confidence that it's not just bad luck why I have endometriosis. It's not just because my mom had diabetes that I had diabetes. You can see where you inadvertently, you didn't do it on purpose, were feeding your organs and your hormones and your endocrine system the wrong raw materials that led to your hormones to malfunction. And then you can take that back and take your power back. Very informative. Please send us the graph about how hormone. Yes, I will post that on the group tomorrow morning, probably. I think that's in the schedule for how the hormones bounce off each other and what when one is low, which one's the one that kicks in. You're welcome, ladies. Please share your takeaways from this class when I post the replay. Keep your questions coming. Let me know how you're feeling. I know some of you, especially today, have been struggling with some of the emotional aspects of detoxing. Let me reassure you that that is 100% normal. The same way that you're going to feel the physical toxins coming out, and they show up as mucus, they show up as headaches, they show up as lower back pain, physical pain, joint pain. The emotional toxins also have to move. They also have to come out. So you're going to feel weepy. You're going to feel like you need to cry. You're going to feel like maybe depressed. You're going to feel moody. None of that is a sign of anything going wrong. It is the emotional toxicity being moved out in exactly the same way that the physical toxicity has to be moved out as well. All right, ladies, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you.
Dana, I'm sorry for interruption.
No,
I just want one more question, please, which is not related to today's topic.
no problem.
I'm just one day behind because yesterday I couldn't make the whole diet as should be.
Okay.
However, the good thing, because I just arrived yesterday, today I asked my host to take me to the grocery store. So I need to know how is the meal plan is going, just very quick, and what to get from the grocery store.
What day are you on?
The first day from 8.
Okay, so today's your deep detox day. You're starting.
Yes.
Okay, so basically you need your celery, if you go and look in your eating schedule document, you have a shopping list there, but basically today you need lemons, you need celery for your smoothie, you need berries and mangoes and cilantro, oranges, you need broccoli, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, or any kind of vegetables, bell peppers, zucchini, mushrooms, if you want to add onions and garlic to that, and then salad ingredients, so fresh lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, green onions, anything you like to put in a salad, and then you repeat that for dinner, and then you need apples and you need dates, basically.
Okay.
For today.
From all of these, I have the dates.
Okay.
Which is great. Okay.
So now you just have the 99 other things you need to go get.
Exactly. So I go for and I'm gonna continue this like for the coming how many days?
You're gonna do this until 1 to 3 days, and then there's one day where you have spinach soup, and then one day where you have potatoes and sweet potatoes on top of what you're eating.
Okay, perfect. So I'll go and get like stuff for 5 days, including the spinach and the potatoes, right?
Exactly.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. All right, ladies, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all tomorrow, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Dana.
You're welcome.
Bye. Bye.